What is going on, Fightful Faithful? Welcome back here to Fightful Scraps for another interview by myself, Corey Brennan. Today, I am joined by a prevalent announcer in the UK and Irish wrestling scene, Mr. Simon Hill. Simon was recently on the call for OTT 10th Anniversary, which was a massive event. And on top of that, he has worked for the likes of North. He works in football with Walsall Football Club. He works in esports. He's a man who has his he's in a lot of industries for announcing. How are you doing today, Simon?
Oh, I'm great. What an introduction. Thank you so much. And yeah, thanks for having me. Life's good. It's been really, really busy, but hey man, I've got the coolest job in the world, so I can't complain.
And we'll start off kind of at the beginning for you. Obviously, with being in so many different industries, I'm sure there's different influences of how you got into announcing those industries. But how did you get into the wrestling industry of announcing? Was it something that was wrestling something that you've always enjoyed, or did that come later when you started announcing?
No, it was something that I enjoyed from a kid. I was a child of the Attitude Era, so I was firmly sat in my nan's living room at the age of 12, 13 every week, trying to convince my parents to let me stay up and watch Raw. So I've got fond memories of, The Rock, Stone Cold, that whole feud. Shawn Michaels, I'm the biggest fan. So it was one of those times where, I always wondered what getting into wrestling was like. And I think the more I worked in the broadcasting world, the more interest that I had in how do I get into wrestling? How does
Mm,
that work? And obviously, like most people, your first thought is how do I become a wrestler? And in the UK, there was a scene, but it wasn't obviously as big as other places within the world. And I wasn't really clued up, and I was very focused on radio at the time because I was working at Kerrang Radio, and then obviously went over to BBC. And it was a lot later on. It was probably 2 years before we went into COVID because I used to DJ a promotions after party. So I started kind of picking people's brains. I was around a lot of talent that were in NXT at that time, and I just, would sit and listen to people and then figure out how I can use my broadcasting skills to get into wrestling, which is something I've been passionate about since I was a kid. And the long story short is I did get into it, and my first ever gig was as a backstage interviewer at TNT. And my first introduction, I remember, was with Tony Storm and Session Moth Martina, who were on the same card in death match, but they did a promo together. And I also had one with the She Wolves and Molly Spartan. They didn't ease me in. Molly Spartan during mid promo decided to attack me, and so it was kind of like, look, listen to, welcome to the Indies, kid. Time to
yeah.
learn, and the rest's history, man. So it's been an awesome journey, though, and I'm very grateful to be a part of the business for sure.
And there's been a bit of a discourse kind of building up in like kind of especially in the wrestling community about like ring announcers and announcing and so on. Like with Samantha Irvin, she said that wasn't really a fan of it. Kayla Braxton came out and said very similar. Do you have like an opinion on that as someone? Because like as you've said, like it's something that you've got a passion for, something you really do enjoy. You look to try and get into wrestling announcing. Do you have a take on that at all, or?
I think, for those guys, they were, on the road constantly. Their expectations were always to be bigger and better every single show. And I think when you're in a position where you're seen every week on TV in front of millions of people, not just the live crowds,
Mhm.
and then you do something what Samantha did, which was become iconic. She went viral. She was then, thought of as one of the greatest ring announcers that we've seen of the modern era. So her expectations have grown exponentially. So I can only imagine the pressure that those guys are under in that position. I think from my standpoint on the role within the business itself, you're there to set the tone for the entire show as an
Mm.
announcer. So in between, we've all been to live tapings, right? And you yourself would have seen the announcers just talking with the crowd, hyping the crowd up in between takes and before the cameras start rolling again. And I think, if you're under that amount of pressure where you're setting the tone for such an important show, I can only imagine that eventually gets on top of you, especially if you want to explore different avenues. Look, those two names you just mentioned are ridiculously talented in more than just announcing. I mean,
Yeah.
Samantha is a multicultural, musician. She's not just an announcer, an actress, and all these amazing things. Same with Kayla Braxton now. She's managed to get herself into some acting roles and other TV spots. And maybe it was just about not so much the announcing side of things, but they just wanted to grow and explore. And maybe at that time they felt like they couldn't.
Fair, completely fair answer. And you mentioned there about growing and kind of just doing something different. Like, and as I've mentioned a couple of times already, you do work in multiple industries in announcing, and I do kind of want to ask, like, how does wrestling differ for you when you come into a wrestling gig versus when you do something for Walsall versus whether you do an esports event? What's that kind of like? Is there any major differences, or is it kind of just kind of same kind of mindset?
I mean, you're working for very different crowds. Football is and can be a very tribalistic crowd in the terms of it's super overly passionate at times.
Mm.
And, you're standing there, for Warsaw, for example, 2 days ago, I was standing in front of 8,500 fans, football fans that just are really engrossed and passionate within that medium. Wrestling fans are, I feel, although they're excited and passionate to be there, it's very different because I feel sometimes you can be a bit more expressive within a wrestling show.
Yeah.
And, as long as it's in a controlled environment and a controlled manner, I think it really pays off. So there are differences for sure. The only crossover really with football and wrestling is fans. They're both passionate. They're both engrossed, and they just want to be captivated at the end of the day. And my job as an announcer in both of those worlds is to make sure that I'm, again, setting the tone or hyping them up, whatever it might be in any way. It's got its similarities within that manner, but in terms of the way it's presented, it's very, very different for sure.
Absolutely. And um, just before we move on to some other topics in the world of like wrestling and so on, I do want to ask you, like, is there ever a time where you kind of mix up your tones, kind of when you're, because yeah, I think it's an understandable question to ask, because kind of you jumping from like, and is for, and mainly this is something that, in my opinion, as a listener and as a viewer, really is the number one rule. Is like, do you feel like passion is kind of like the number one rule of what makes a good announcer, at least in what they convey to the audience?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Because I can't connect with you if I'm not passionate about what I'm saying,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So not comparing myself, but you look at Leonardo DiCaprio, he only takes selective roles on things he knows he could portray passionately.
yeah,
So he's not going to go and do something he doesn't care about. Because although he's a professional, you've still got to have a feeling about that. And it's the same within this world, whether that be commentating or announcing, same with Warsaw. And look, I think there have been times, because what's been good about Warsaw is I'm a fan and I'm originally from there too. So I grew up as a Walsall fan and ended up working for them, which was obviously
yeah.
a childhood dream, and crazy that I still get to say that. And I think there are times where I have been overly passionate the way I would in front of a wrestling crowd. Um, so there are crossover there, and I'm certainly
Yeah.
guilty of it. But it's the way you control it as well, I think, which is really important. So although those mediums can cross over, you've still got to be professional. You've still got to try and control the output, as to say. And yeah, look, I've had some moments for sure in front of the Walsall fans, and possibly vice versa. But I think within wrestling, when I'm in that environment, it's very it's very tunnel vision. You
Hmm.
know, commentators and announcers on show day don't have time to do much other
Yeah.
than, gather the notes and get everything right, because our job is to put whatever's going on over in the ring and,
Yeah.
make it from a presentation point of view sparkle, look good and sound good. And, so we're just 100% tunnel vision focused on what that is within wrestling. Football's a little bit more free range, I feel.
And when it comes to wrestling announcing, there's so many like kind of legendary announcers. Obviously, you did mention how fast Samantha became a legendary one. But as someone who, when you first started doing ring announcing, not so much commentating, but you could, I suppose, you could answer both roles kind of in this question. Um, who would have been your primary influence on the style of your ring introductions and on your commentary in wrestling?
So with ring introductions, although I've never been like a huge UFC fan or anything like that, I know he does more boxing, but he was also quite influential within wrestling in the early days. Michael Buffer.
Hmm.
I think that guy adds so much to the product in the way he presents and captivates an audience, and I think that's so important within that role. So for me, it wasn't directly somebody who worked for WWE or WCW or whoever. It was Michael Buffer, who, we all know he did stuff with WCW. I think he did some WrestleMania stuff, and
Hmm.
um, his style for me was what grabbed me and what really made me want to kind of get into that side of things. And a funny story actually is when I officially signed for Warsaw 3 seasons ago, they announced me as Warsaw's Michael Buffer. Well, Michael Buffer caught onto this on Twitter, retweeted it, and quoted, Simon, I hope you made the best got rock. And and then there was a tweet a couple of months after that when I was in the newspaper. I think I sent you the article,
Yeah.
and he responded to that, going, Simon, you do a wonderful job. Keep up the good work. And you know what? To get that level of acknowledgement, I guess, from what I would personally consider the best in the world,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
you can never top that, can you? So yeah, that's something I will never forget and just take with me to the grave. So as someone who was influenced by him to then later on in my career get acknowledgement, I mean, like, I'm just living a dream out here.
And then obviously on the commentary side, was there anyone there? Obviously, there's so many iconic commentators over the years, and obviously, most recently you were, well, now I don't know if it was most recently, but we were talking about just before we started recording OTT 10th Anniversary. You're on the call with Angus, which was, I imagine, was just another thing entirely. I do want to talk about 10th Anniversary separately, just kind of
Yeah.
just mentioning it as an example. But yeah, was there any influences on your commentary style, or was it kind of just your own kind of creation?
Yeah, like, obviously, like a lot of people, they'll say Jim Ross, but I think I did dissect Jim Ross a lot growing up.
Hmm.
Um, I also like the WCW lineup. I think they were great. I think Bobby Heenan as well was fantastic. I personally could never be a heel commentator. I think as well a lot of commentators in the modern day try to replicate that, and you never will.
Yeah.
There's only a couple of really good natural heel commentators out there. I think Jamie Coleman is absolutely brilliant at it.
Hmm.
Um, at OTT, I think he's fantastic. Isaiah Quinn over here is another one, so natural. But I think, if you go back for me, Jim Ross, Mauro Ranallo as well,
Yeah.
Bobby Heenan, all those kind of guys who were able to not just build stories and add to that moment, but also create their own gimmick around it and make you feel something. I think that's the important part, isn't it, with commentary? You want to feel
Yeah.
what's going on in the ring. So when I'm calling something of Balor and JD, I want you to feel like that moment's a big moment. And I think that's what I look for in commentary.
And I do want to talk about 10th anniversary because it was such a massive event. Like it
Oh
was
yeah.
just probably one of, if not the biggest events in Irish wrestling history. I think that's a very safe bet to mention. But it was an event that kind of was a bit of a hectic one, and I imagine a very stressful one for you and Angus, especially with Martina. I do want to talk about Martina first because obviously,
Sure.
if people aren't aware, especially about Martina, she took a bad spill. Uh, in the closing stages of her match with Raven Creed. She had to go to the hospital after she took a bad bang. But obviously, as an announcer, you have to be prepared for that kind of moment. What was going through your head, obviously, other than concern for Martina, just trying to convey what was going on? Obviously, it wasn't live, knowing that it was going to be on demand, but still.
So obviously the first thing that goes through your head is, your concern for the talent. And in that case it was Martina, and it was we didn't catch on straight away until we saw certain people on
Mm-hmm.
stage tending to Martina. And in that moment, you just have to stay professional. Personally within your own personal self that you're wishing she's okay and everything's fine. It's just,
Mm-hmm.
you're hoping it's more of an impact injury than anything else. Obviously, it wasn't. It was a lot more than that. And she's recovering. I've spoken to her recently.
Mm-hmm.
It's a birthday today of this
Yeah, it
filming, I
is.
think. Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
um so happy birthday, Martina. But yeah, it's one of those that you're there to do a job,
Mm-hmm.
and our job is to remain professional and remain in that moment. And personally, we are also at that time thinking that, look, we hope she's okay, and
Yeah.
whatever's going on, it's going to be sorted pretty quick.
And just to just say as well, happy birthday to Martina. Hopefully she is doing better, and she is going to be back in the ring soon. So we do know that already. So that's good to know. And just that event in general, it was kind of just one of it, for me personally. Anyway, I went to All In this year. I went to multiple UK indie events. I went to the Copper Box. I went to all those venues this year. But I don't think I've ever been in an arena or a stadium that had a kind of an atmosphere quite like in the National Stadium that night. And as an announcer, I imagine that was kind of almost like a kind of a big massive push in the back to just adrenaline kind of even as an announcer. So what was that atmosphere like personally for you sitting in the commentary box?
Do you know, I said the same thing as what you've just said. I was also at Wembley with AEW, and what they put on a great show. But
Mhm.
the amount of wrestling shows I've worked, been a part of, or just attended as a fan, I have never ever experienced anything like that. We it was just a constant rush of adrenaline and endorphins, and the unreal feeling of what we're a part of. It was unlike anything else in my career, and I'm very proud to be a part of it. I was very grateful to OTT and Joe for trusting me and believing in me to be a part of that, and to be able to be a voice behind that show. And Angus, of course, the dream commentary partner. Nobody pushes you to be better quite like Angus McAnally. I think I put it on an Instagram post. The most gifted commentator for me not to be signed to a major corporation. And I generally, mean that. I think he's unreal at his job, and he makes me step up to be better at mine. And yeah, the energy, I think you can see when we all come out, myself, Angus, Jade, and the refs, we all walk to the ring, and I just stand there for a second, just doing a 360.
Yeah.
It's
I remember seeing you doing it as well from IC. I could remember you just kind of looking around like, oh my god, just
yeah,
because the atmosphere was just insane. Like Angus, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I remember Angus kind of he went to start his introduction and everything like that, and then he put his mic back down because the OTT chants were already starting.
yeah,
So I remember seeing you kind of looking around like, wow.
yeah.
Oh my god! So you definitely you were spotted doing that anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I'm not ashamed to, because one
Yeah.
thing you do forget to do in these environments sometimes is take the moment.
Mm.
And when you're given the honor and privilege of a moment, then be sure to take it. And I think that was also Angus. Although he's used to that environment, he's done 10 years worth of shows for OTT and being at the stadium time and time again. I think for him as well, to be there 10 years in and just witnessing the place explode before a bell had even rung.
Yeah.
I think that's why that mic went down, for him to just
Yeah.
appreciate what was going on around us. The goosebumps, the nerves, it was all kicking in at once. But on the other hand, because of the crowd reactions, we're just getting this huge boost of adrenaline.
Yeah.
And look, the crowd were phenomenal that night from minute one right through to the end.
And obviously the big moment on that card was Finn Balor and JD
Yeah.
McDonough's return to Irish wrestling. So that was kind of another thing entirely for me to experience, just being in the crowd for. So I can't imagine what it was like to be in the commentary box, because it was just one of those moments where, like, you usually get hometown moments on every kind of show, no matter what indie you're in or whatever. You're going to get one or two. But there's something about an Irish crowd where the hometown is just so much louder, and it was just one of those things that I'll always remember being in that for that moment. So I can't imagine what it was like for you.
Yeah, again, I think this is going back to what we mentioned about Samantha Irvin earlier, is you feel a sense of expectation. Look, this is one of the biggest, if not the biggest moment in OTT history. And my job is, alongside Angus, to make this moment feel important and
Yeah.
not to overdo it at the same time as well. So I'm going in, and my inner fan, like, like, I'm bouncing off the walls, I'm screaming, but I'm also know that I've still got a job to do for the next 25 minutes. So, what I've got to do and what I've got to say is, of high importance, because at the end of the day as well, what you have to think is this match was getting sent to WWE and it was getting watched
Hmm.
by more than just the Irish crowd, you
Yeah.
know. So again, those expectations are, let's get through this, and let's get
Yeah.
through this together. And yeah, look, if I showed a little bit of vulnerability, then I would say personally, I was a massive Finn Balor mark when he was in NXT.
Yeah.
So that personal side of me, right inside, deep down, past the commentator, is screaming that I'm getting to call a Finn Balor match. But at the forefront, it's business first.
And as amazing as the in-ring stuff was in the main event between Socially and Judgment Day, it very much felt like a kind of a moments match, if you get what I mean. Kind of,
Yep.
it was fantastic in the ring regardless. But early on in the card, we kind of had two matches that were kind of very, very good in the terms of the bubble of the matches that they were, like Michael Oku versus Ogla Blanc,
Oh,
Jay versus Sammy D. Two just like you had, I'd say if you put the three top matches, it'd be those three matches for different reasons.
hmm.
What is it like as an announcer, kind of just coming through these three very, very different matches?
Well, your job becomes, look, you, even on a 9-match card or an 8-match card, whatever it might be, you've still got to make every match sound different
Yeah.
to the last one. But you're all always, that there's a journey. So my top is here with Finn Balor, and I'm going to ride all the way up, match by match by match,
Mm.
and the top is the main event. So it's about creating moments. It's building those for the fans, and for those watching at home, we want to give you the same feeling that it was like being there. Now, yeah, you might not be able to feel the crowd electricity, but we can help build those moments of high importance. Oku and Blanc just absolutely tore the roof off, and we wanted to portray that as much as we possibly could. Jay and Sammy D, it was a big story that had gone on for quite a while. Obviously, there's a lot of personal inputs in there with Jay's sister. So again, it's with that one, what we want to portray is more of an emotional side, because it's now become about personal, family, and rivalry. So it's very different to calling a high spot match, what I would consider a high spot match, like Oku and Blanc, where it is spot, 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 and it's about the crowd. It's bringing the crowd up at those moments. And then when you get to the main event, it's very different again. So we've gone through the personal, emotional side. We've gone through the high spots of adding those moments, and then we've got to the main event, which is about a homecoming. It's about the history of Irish wrestling. It's about portraying what Irish wrestling means to the world, and those are three very different matches. So three very different ways of delivering commentary, in my opinion, anyway.
And kind of just got branched away from OTT to kind of just in general, like you've announced for just pretty nearly most promotions in the UK and Ireland at this point. I was looking through like a couple of days ago because when we were setting this up, I was like, okay, it just didn't stop. And you got Progress, you got Defy, you've got Future Shock Wrestling, you've got so on and so forth like that. Do you ever feel like there's a big difference going from one promotion to another in wrestling? Because obviously every promotion has a different kind of product. They have different direction. They have different wrestlers. They have different start. Obviously with the UK scene, there's a lot of shared talent, but some of them are heels in some companies, some are faces in others. So I feel like is it a bit overwhelming at times?
It certainly can be, yeah. I think one of the biggest things that I try not to think of too much is getting sucked into having to just do one job one way.
Yeah.
So my commentary is going to be very, very different at Future Shock. It's a family product for a start than it will be for OTT. Like OTT for me are the biggest promotion outside of the Atlantic right now. So my commentary is going to be totally different for OTT than it would be for Future Shock or for Odyssey Pro Wrestling, because they're family events that are centered around stories that a very different crowd will watch and engage with. So, although, yeah, you're calling, if I'm calling the same talent, which I have done in the past, I've called, for Future Shock, the same matches that happened at Odyssey within a couple of weeks of each other, but the roles are reversed for the talent. So now you're telling a different story. And how do you do that without intertwining everything and you're mind blowing? So it's research, man. And I think, a lot of new commentators forget the importance of what the role entails. And I, for an OTT show, I said it recently, like sometimes my research will take me a week because I want to get stuff people don't even know, people haven't heard for a while, or get those stats that you weren't aware of and be able to deliver them at the right time, at the right moment, so we don't take away from the match. And again, there's a strategy to it, right? So like for me, I commentate the way a wrestling match is planned. Like I actually went wrestling training to learn the psychology to be able to be better at commentating. And I think that's a really important asset to have because I now understand what it takes to be a wrestler and how that psychology works. And now I know how to plan my commentary.
Absolutely. And before I do let you go, Simon, you've been wonderful, but I do want to ask you, we're heading into the last 2 months. We're in the last 2 months of 2024. Obviously, 2025, I imagine you're hoping to be your biggest year, much like everyone else I chat to and ask this question. But is there any specific goals in mind for you in 2025? Is there any promotions that you'd love to do a gig for, or just anything in specific within the world of wrestling?
Yeah, I think I put on my social media that my ultimate goal, because I set small goals to achieve them to keep going up, right? And excuse me, my goal 3 years ago and further was to always work for OTT. That was my number one goal. I always wanted to work for OTT. So when I get that opportunity, when we did our first show in Wolverhampton a couple of years ago, I was over the moon. Then a week after that, Joe messaged me and said, "Are you free for the Christmas party 2022 for Dublin and Belfast?" Yes. So he flew me over. So I'm like, brilliant. Now I've got to work. I'm no longer just convenient for OTT because of the
Yeah.
area that I live in. He's actually flying me out. He values what I do. And then it was to always do the National Stadium. That
Yeah.
was the top goal, which I've just done on the biggest show in Irish wrestling history, in my opinion.
Hmm.
And now I look and I go, right, so what's next? And when you have worked for what I would consider the biggest promotion in Europe at the biggest event that they have, where do I go from here? So I'm not too unrealistic where I'm one of those that go, oh yeah, I want to go to a WWE or I want to go to AEW or TNA. Like, set the goals that build around that. And I think now it's just to continue delivering my best work and to be able to connect with more people. At the end of the day, my job is about entertaining others. That's what a commentary and announcer, whether that's football, wrestling, or esports, the goals are the same. It's to entertain and connect with others. And I think that is all I really want to do going into 2025. I will be a lot more selective with where I do that. I think going into 2025, I've had a lot of fun with some amazing promotions, but for me to continue growing and continue connecting with the right people and the right audiences, it's I have to be a bit more selective. So let's just see where it goes. I'm really happy at the moment. I think coming out of OTT has just made me appreciate the work that I've actually put in to get here. Sometimes I forget about that and what it's taken to get here. And I think that is why, we go back to what we mentioned earlier. I just took that moment in front of
Yeah.
2,200 people to just go, man, it's been a journey to get here, but I'm actually standing here now. And, most of that, what I said in the ring during that introduction was scripted apart from a couple of things. And I think one of them is where I stopped and I just said, look at this,
Yeah.
and yeah, that wasn't scripted at all. So it was just about appreciating that moment of what OTT has built, the moment we're all in together and what we're about to experience. And hopefully there's more of that in 2025 for sure.
And once again, Simon, thank you so much for sitting down with me today. You've been absolutely wonderful to chat to. Do you want to tell people where they can find you on social media? And do you want to plug your industry space while you're at it and where they can see you next?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. And it's been an honor. I know this has been in the works for a while now, a couple of weeks at least. So I'm really grateful to have got the opportunity to come and speak to you today, man. And yeah, hopefully at the next OTT show, we'll have a proper chat.
Yeah.
But yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, you can find me everywhere, Simon H Official, Twitter or X, whatever you call it, Facebook and Instagram, all the same. TikTok as well. I do upload commentary kind of snippets there. That's Simon H Official. The industry space is a new inclusive space on Twitter. It's an audio-based platform where we encourage anybody that works within the business to join and share their insights, as well as stories and things like that, be able to connect with other people and network within the business. So the next one's on the 19th of November. It was going to be tomorrow, but I've double booked myself with work and stuff. So I will be back with that on the 19th. I think we have Sam Gradwell for that, so that'll be really good, really insightful. And that's it for me, really. And again, thank you so much for having me, man. I really appreciate it.
No problem at all, man. Like I said, you were absolutely wonderful. Guys, make sure to go out and follow Simon. Give a listen into that space. It is incredibly insightful. A lot of tips and that for everyone really involved in the industry to take note of. And yeah, if you're new to Fightful Scraps, guys, make sure to like, subscribe, comment down below who you'd like to see me interview in the UK, Irish, and European scene. And see you all in the next one.